This is Eric Miscoll with EMS Now, and welcome to another edition of the virtual Eric Miscoll Show. We appreciate you taking time out of your schedules to join with us today, what I think should be a pretty damn good discussion. So as always, thank you to my co-host Phil Stoughton for signing in bright and early in Australia. Our focus today is to be on the PCB industry, not PCBA, but the actual PCB boards, the fabrication in that, which is really the core piece of material for all electronics manufacturing. I was telling Phil before, I remember when I worked in a quick turn proto shop, we do consigned builds sometimes, and clients would send us their consigned kit and say, well, start building. And it's like, well, we don't have a board. How can we build, right? And it, which really underscores how important the board really is. Our guests today, what we've invited, are two gentlemen who know this industry pretty well. So let me introduce real quick. Roger Harts is a director with iCape Group, and Greg Papendrew is the PCB buying expert with Better Board Buying. That just welcome to all, and thank you very much for taking time out of your schedules today. I was looking to this one for a bit. Let's begin, as we always do, by asking each of you gentlemen to introduce yourselves and your organizations for the benefit of the audience. And Greg, since you're on the top in my screen, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, great. Well, hi, Greg Papindrew. I've been in the board industry for over 28 years. That's what I've been doing is I've been selling boards. I'm pretty much known as a broker. It's okay, you can call me the B word. I'm all right with that. And right now, in my career, I've become more of a consultative approach with buying of circuit boards, where better board buying, as you're saying, is that the buyers of today are not like the buyers that were when I started 25 years ago. And there's a lot of buyers out there that just don't know, program managers that don't know how to buy a board properly or how to save money. And that's my mission, and that's what I do. I do a lot of training with OEMs and EMS companies, and you go on my LinkedIn or YouTube page, and you'll see I do videos on that, do that training. So I do training online or in person, and then I help customers get what they need.
Excellent. Good. And I think you struck at one of the key issues, saving money, and we'll get back to that one here as we go. Roger, sir, tell us about it.
Yes, sir. Yes, I'm Roger Harts. I'm the managing director for iCape USA, North American headquartered in Indianapolis, Indiana. iCape is a global printed circuit board contract supplier. Greg, I eliminated the trading company definition. I don't have near the experience that Mr. Papendrew has. I've only been with the company for 5 years in the industry. We are very fortunate to have some really nice facilities, and headquartered in Paris, France, largest office in Shenzhen. And I'm just happy to have been considered to participate in this panel discussion. I think it's some great topics that we're going to go through, and should be a interesting conversation.
Well, excellent. Well, I hope so too.
Yeah.
Listen, let's start with kind of the elephant in the room, the pandemic. Obviously, the pandemic has impacted all of us, both on business level and personal levels, in unexpected ways here. We're all ready for 2021, I think. So, but from the PCB side of it, we've heard a lot from other industries, Phil and I, as we've done interviews this year. But what was the impact really for the PCB fabrication industry? And we started this conversation before, so Greg, why don't we pick up on that with you there, sir?
Yeah, sure. Well, at first it was a concern because, as you said earlier, the circuit board is where it all begins. It's what I like about the circuit board. It is the last thing ordered, the first thing needed. The gestation period on the sale of a circuit board. I mean, the gestation period is, whatever it is, and it's needed. it represents 8 to 12% of the bill of material. Because it's custom made, it comes down either from halfway around the world or down the street, depending on technology, quantity, what you have. The price is subjective. And, there was a concern when the pandemic hit, when China, for lack of a better word, extended its annual Chinese New Year because of the COVID. And people are like, okay, our supply chain, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And, again, it's the foundation of, if you're an OEM, our product, or it's a foundation, if you're an EMS, your customer's product. So how do we do this? And people are saying, I'll bring it back home, shorten the supply chain, regionalize supply chain. And that was the concern, to get things back here. And well, as people were looking at things and looking at total cost of ownership, and there is price and there's total cost of ownership, before we knew it, China was back up and running. And here domestically, it's hard to get. I mean, I have customers, OEMs, who've contacted me, and I wrote a column in another magazine for this month, and I would talk about this Made in America and how it was hard to get vendors to quote jobs, and they was like, well, we don't want to compete against China. I said, I'm not asking to compete against China. The customer understands they're coming here for the value add of knowing that their supply chain is regional or close by. And it's very hard to find domestic manufacturers that are willing to take on some of the volume, some of that production, even getting the quote, because they're afraid it's too much work. And I'm like, well, how do we expect to bring work back here to the US? And it's always getting to a point where is Made in USA just a bygone slogan, because it's hard to find that being built. When I'm going in there, here's the customer, here's the drawing, here's the print, target pricing, what can you do? And there's a big, oh, no, we really don't want to quote. And you're like, geez. Yeah. And what's going to happen is eventually, and I don't mean to go along this, Roger, but what's happening is that, you're wondering is this going to be a slogan of bygone era, where customers are going to go overseas because they're not getting the service and they're not getting the board. So they have to get it somewhere. And if it's not here, it has to be somewhere else.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Rod, what's been your view of it?
Well, I mean, I do agree with Greg and a lot of that. I mean, initially, the fact that it happened during the Chinese New Year kind of kept people in their location. As viewers may be aware, a lot of the labor is actually shipped in from middle China into the coastal area where most of the factories are. Those people were home on vacation basically when the pandemic hit, which made it very difficult for board houses to get back up to speed quickly. I did see as you mentioned, Greg, I did see a trend of customers wanting to attempt to move production back into the US. And we started attempting to resource and qualify other vendors domestically. But China reacted very quickly, locked down inter-travel within the country, maintained kind of control on the spread of the virus, got back up and running very quickly. And as we all know in the electronics industry, Southeast Asia is very dominant, and they got up and running quickly, and with some disruption to the supply chain. It was funny, I had conversations with customers that had put in place many contingency plans. One of mine was up near Cleveland, as a matter of fact, near a nuclear facility. And he said, I had a contingency plan for a nuclear meltdown to transition my production to another location. But he said the pandemic caught me completely off guard. I was not prepared on how to respond to that. And I think that was the real impact to production in the board business, certainly domestically, was just how to react to that type of thing. I think we all know how we react if there's an earthquake or a fire or something to that level of destruction. But this pandemic, it was an eye-opening experience, to say the least.
Yeah, I actually wrote. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Philip.
No, I was going to say it certainly seems to have exposed what's happened in the last 20 years in the US, which is just mothballing and closing of all those PCB facilities, because it wasn't always this way, was it, Greg? There used to be a pretty impressive manufacturing footprint in the US. I guess that's all that volume stuff has gone, and is it just prototype shops now?
Well, yeah, there's prototypes of low volume, but did we lose all that production? Because a lot of stuff that's being built right now, we never really had that business here. There's technology, cell phones. Well, we never lost cell phones. We never really built them here. So there's a lot of things that we haven't. Over the years, when I look at domestic board houses, and I've been through a lot of them, and if you go through lists, I always say there's a couple of things. If they're well funded, they had a great marketing, they knew their processes, had a good production management, marketed well, and they still went out of business, then I would say you're right, it's China's fault. But a lot of that is not true. So a lot of the board houses that went out of business, they were run by the offspring, the kids. No offense to that. I mean, you've got dad run the business, who's the engineer, who's got the heart and soul, and that's his passion. Well, Junior doesn't, and so Junior comes in. And when dad was doing it, we didn't have the environmental controls. We didn't have ISO back then. We just built boards. We were doing quotes on napkins back in the day. Okay, this is before my time. Back in the day, you had martini lunches and people were doing these things, and it's like friends, and it's down the street. And before we had the technology that, I don't have to send this silver, so the actual artwork, or as we were talking about the red and blue, the trace artwork, the hand carried to somebody. Now I can send it to somebody anywhere. So there's a lot of factors that have changed all that. And then here comes in Junior remember the heyday of what dad had, and it's a whole different world now. Yeah. And then with that being said, when I started 28 years ago, you saw a board from China and you kind of laughed. You saw how the solder mask, the screen, you could actually look like they use an actual screen, a big wide screen. And then it got to a point, you see a board from offshore and you go, wow, look at this board. And then it was quality. And then it got to a point where you couldn't tell where it was coming from, because for just like the Japanese automakers, if it was for the Japanese automakers, the US car would not have the technology, wouldn't be as good as it is today.
Yeah, I agree.
And they've actually driven. And so with that being said, did this competition also force those that really shouldn't have been in the business in the first place, weed them out, and drive the technology where it is today? And fortunately, unfortunately, you can't tell where a board comes from by looking at it these days, because even some of those boards from domestic shops are brokered too. So they're supplementing their stuff on that. So that's the reason why, that some of that business has gone away.
What about Mexico?
Mexico's limited.
Why is there no volume production in Mexico? It doesn't make sense.
There was once, when I started, there was a company in California, I'm trying to think of the name, that went south of the border there on the West Coast, and then it didn't last very long. And this was still when China wasn't the powerhouse it is today, or Southeast Asia for that matter. But it wasn't the powerhouse it's today. I don't know. There are a lot of assemblers putting up shop there, offering a nearshore opportunity for assemblies, which I think is not a bad idea.
It's just surprising it's not supported by a PCB industry in south of the border and elsewhere in Central America. Is it about low cost labor? Is that why it initially went to China? Because PCBs aren't super labor intensive, are they?
Well,
You know,
no,
you don't
but I
see a
mean,
whole lot of people in a bare board shop.
not anymore, that's for sure. I've been in some places where, you have 13 guys on a line that goes 650 feet and goes in raw material, comes out of board, and there's only 13 guys. I don't know. I mean, is it, as Gene Weiner said to me a long time ago, and he forgets he says this to me because I always credit with him when saying, the China of tomorrow will be China.
Yeah.
As far as Mexico, I maybe because the supply chain for raw materials, everything is built over there. You can't get a drill machine made in the US anymore. You can't get chemicals, you can't get materials. The supply
That's
chain
true.
is there.
Yeah.
Is that part of the cost? I mean, everything will be imported into Mexico for a manufacturer of board. Do you use it for tariff engineering? I don't know. A board, all the materials come from China. There's a significant alteration to them. A board ships from Mexico, there is no tariff. Could that be a factor? But the supply chain, the ultimate supply chain still originates in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
That's true,
What
Greg.
about?
Sorry,
Go ahead,
Robert. I often wondered if Mexico there's not a knowledge gap there, since we've been manufacturing electronic components in China for so long. I think that we are now missing a lot of the knowledge that goes along with that industry. And it's often, I've always thought that Mexico would be a great place to source boards from. As you mentioned, no tariff certainly eliminates a lot of potential freight wars and shipping concerns. It's really confused me. I mean, they would certainly have access to raw material through us, and it would be logistically would make more sense. But I do agree, Greg, there's no access to machines. And I'm just always wondered if
Well,
it's not just
Roger, you brought up a good point even about the labor part of it. I mean, right now, you talk about it's hard to find people who are experienced in this industry trying to get into manufacturing, whether it be assembly or boards. It's hard to find people who are interested in that. China. So if it's bad here, the industry does not exist in Mexico. So you have nobody really there. I'm sure there's plating going on, but not circuit board plating.
right.
And then the other thing is you got China there that actually has college courses that they train people how to build a board. We don't have that here. So, I wouldn't expect it south of the border either.
I would agree with you there as well, for sure.
And guys, when you look at that dominance in Southeast Asia, how has that changed the way boards are made? Has that accelerated things like digital transformation, things like automation? Has the industry moved forward at a speed since it migrated east?
Oh, definitely. You can whether it's the mentality, the scrap rate, whether the government, the government supporting, whether it's, for an government investment in these shops, but the automation is unbelievable. I mean, like I said, you have a line that's 600 meters long and, or 600 feet, whatever it may be, and 12 guys on it, goes in bare material, comes out of board the other end. And it's just amazing. I think they've really capitalized that, and they've taken off with the equipment that is unbelievable, until this, I usually go twice a year. Okay, this year I haven't, but every time I went back there, it was like, oh, what's that? That's a new piece of equipment. So what does this do? Wow.
Yeah.
And you're like, I remember the old days, making a board, and it's like, oh, it's totally changed. They're accelerating. They really are.
Yeah. They certainly are. I've had we've taken customers over there that are amazed by the automation of some of the facilities now. But I don't think China's immune by any means to the increase in labor costs. So I think there is definitely an advantage for them to embrace this digitalization movement in our factories. It's certainly, I think they need to be aware that they still need to be competitive as well. So even though they dominate, there's some more emerging markets in and around China that want that business as well. So I think there's certainly an accelerated movement to embrace that the smart factory,
that transformation.
Now,
So Roger, you talk about other countries having a dividend. One of the things we've often talked about on this show is people moving to this China plus one strategy, where maybe they're trying to create some redundancy or resilience in the supply chain for the next disruption, even though China seems to have managed this one better than most. And a country that comes up a lot for the EMS industry particularly is Vietnam. Where are the trends in Asia in terms of new bareboard capacity, new PCB shops popping up, and where are OEMs looking?
Well, I mean, I can't speak directly for OEMs, but I do see our sourcing team are looking for options throughout a lot of the emerging countries, Malaysia, Vietnam particularly. It's my understanding that Chinese factories or board houses are actually establishing new facilities in Vietnam and other locations throughout Southeast Asia. All of those countries still have to go back to China for access to the raw material. I don't think the expertise and technology is necessarily in place yet for them to be a true player, but it's not out of the realm of possibilities that companies are certainly looking to dual source their supply chain. That really only makes sense.
Is China laminate central? Is that where most of the laminates are coming from?
I think that's my understanding. Certainly their ability to produce a lot of that is way exceeds anybody else in that area.
China and Taiwan, and those that are in Taiwan have their major operations.
Taiwan always used to be a superpower for
PCB.
Well,
just echo what Roger was saying about Vietnam. Being one who supplies PCBs, I am a customer, I am a buyer. And, even though I swear by my suppliers in Taiwan and China, the fact of the matter is I have to look. And that has to be my plus one too, just to be responsible to my customer base. And if it wasn't for the fact of COVID and I have to be in, in quarantine for 2 weeks, I'd be over there in Vietnam right now and checking things out.
Sure.
But a lot of stuff, and Roger's correct if I'm speaking out of line. I mean, we deal with a lot of high mix, low to medium volume, and Vietnam is not there yet. With handling the multitude of customers, multiples of part numbers and everything else. It will be, I'm sure it will be. And if the tariff continues, I think that's going to be a big push to continue that.
Agreed, 100%.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
But again, if it wasn't for the fact of COVID, I'd be come back to you right now and I would have been there and say, hey, this is what I found in Vietnam. This is what's good or bad, or Philippines, Malaysia, like Roger was saying, is I would have been giving you a report on that, in my opinion. But no, then I have to wait 2 weeks before I come back into the country. So back in Europe,
you'll be back out there soon, Greg. You'll be back out there soon.
Yeah. So let me take it from the geographic focus to kind of the customer demand focus, kind of the changes that are going there. What is driving that? What is, I mean, the boards of old are not what they're building today. Obviously you guys are responsive, or the boards have to be responsive to the type of products and the technology advancements that are going on there. What are you seeing? How in that regard?
I don't want to interrupt or step on you, Greg, but I mean, we see a much higher demand in HDI, multi-layer boards. Space and traces keeps getting thinner and thinner, and density of them, it keeps getting smaller and smaller. It's a big growth factor that I feel certainly maybe not a micro trend, but a trend in the industry in general is the fact that boards keep getting smaller and smaller and are expected to offer more capabilities. And I really think that's what we see as a trend. The high volume, single-sided, double-sided stuff with LEDs and that is always in demand, but I think that we'll see going into the future certainly more of that, just high layer count HDI.
More demanding.
Would be my opinion.
That and flex.
Flex.
Yeah.
Yes, there you go. Absolutely.
No, you're seeing the same thing as we're seeing. The demand for flex and the miniaturization is getting ridiculous now, and so that's interesting.
Is there one particular end user industry that's driving you particularly hard? Is it mil-aero? Is it medical? What's really pushing you in terms of technology at the moment?
We're probably certainly seeing more demands from the medical industry than consumer or industrial as far as technology goes. But I think we could see an influx of consumer demand with technology as wearable devices become more predominant. And Greg touched base on flex. As we see, automotive manufacturers look to potentially replace wiring harnesses with flex boards. We may see a big demand in that as well, and maybe in the near future, or maybe not in the near future, but in the long term. So
I have, I agree with Rogers. I'm not so much the medical. It's just that right now my concentration is several large projects where it's now getting into, because of COVID, has actually, taken it one step further and faster. It has to do a lot with security and, security and safety now, where we're doing identification through a device that's in your wallet, and it's a full-blown miniature computer that you carry very easily. And, we're, we're getting down to a 4 mil flex board, and it's still too thick. So, it's like, okay, great, and oh yeah, but Greg, we want this to be 20 cents too. Yeah. Okay, sure.
Yeah.
So it's like, so we have to be creative. We have to, think of ways, but
yeah. And we need it in 2.5 weeks.
Yes.
I was going to say they want it perfect. They want it free, and they want it now. It's as simple as that. So you gotta pick your battles there.
You guys certainly have more experience in the industry, but in my tenure, that's the thing that's always amazed me is that they need it now. And I keep thinking, well, this was designed months or years ago. While it's so urgent, you guys are probably used to that by now. It still amazes me, quite frankly.
Well, but Roger, that comes up to another point of what you're saying about the difference in buyers and things of today and yesteryear is that, one time when I first started, I had a customer, this is local, when I worked for a local board house here in Florida, drove up, my boards are late. Why are my boards late? Drives up and comes in, and I said, well, let me show you what it takes to make a board. And I showed him all, through the whole process. When we got to his boards, I said, here are your boards. Now, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to, before I could finish, trying to consult, trying to handhold, try to give him all that confidence. Before I could finish, he puts his hand on my shoulder and said, Greg, just get him when you can get him.
Yeah.
He didn't understand what went into making a circuit board.
Right.
And that's where lies a problem when you're dealing with a lot of customers today. They just don't understand and why. And that gets into the pricing, what you were talking about earlier, Eric, where, because they don't know, either there's an under or an over expectation of what should be coming in through that door. And it's either costing them money because they quoted the board wrong, or that they underquoted the board. So on the board, actually, when the Gerbers went out and they actually looked at it, it's like the board's not $1. It's now it's got HDI. Oh, because you didn't give all that information. Or now you lost the job because you quoted it wrong and quoted too high. And that's where I come in with all my training. It's like, it is subjective, but make sure we're comparing apples to apples.
There's two issues here, and let me start on one, which is the new normal in the industry will be more customization, though, right? I spoke to an OEM yesterday. They do, I think he said 250 to 300 prototypes a year. They'll get 50 new products out of that. It's all, fully automated line, CTO, it's all that. So the board industry has to follow suit, right? You have to follow those trends as well. So how are things like Phil was asking about before with digitalization and industrial instrumentation, are they keeping up with that, or how do you rate that as far as their technological capabilities in meeting the increased demand for faster time?
Roger does that a lot with their place out of Indiana, correct?
Yeah, we do some rapid prototype assembly stuff here, but even with the technology and the machines that we have available to us, it's difficult. We're manufacturing things that have basically not been done before. So there's this learning curve that even people with 40 years experience are struggling to make right the first time, which is incredibly important. Luckily, in those situations, customers tend to be a little more understanding when it's not been done before. Mm-hmm. But Greg, I wanted to just mention that I watched one of your videos about educating the buyer, and that's actually one I liked, I believe. So, and it was it seemed really interesting to me that how important that part of this industry is, and getting people to understand how difficult this is. It is truly a very, very complex product, and it's not
mission critical, isn't it?
It could be, but it is a difficult task to tackle. And when I first started, it amazed me that this stuff ever worked, quite frankly. But
when it comes down to the quick turn, where you're saying to develop, Eric, when you're talking develop 50, 250 new designs a year, and 50 may come out. But Roger didn't mention the fact that, okay, we got this stuff, we want to do this. Oh, we can't get the parts.
That's a good point.
We can't get to the parts, and you're like, I don't know what else to do. I don't know what else to say to you, Mr. Customer, but can we use something else? It's like, so, and that's the best laid plans, so the components add an extra layer to it.
Yeah. So what about the digitization of the purchasing process? Basically, when you're ordering a PCB, you've got digital data, you've got Gerbers. Are we in a position where you can upload that to a website and you can get a price straight away? Are there AI engines that are getting those prices created and getting all that out there? And is that reliable?
Yes, and it's reliable enough for, yes, you can do that right now. You can go ahead and throw Gerbers up, and they'll come back, and they'll even do sometimes a DFM automatically, and here's your price for the board. In that case, what they're doing is they're combining boards on one panel. Sometimes they can offer those, you see those things, $33, $66 a board, whatever. But it's a standard build. There's nothing too fancy. You can get, in some cases, get a one-off or whatever, where you're doing some specialty build, and they will charge you an arm and leg for that because you're paying for time. So yes, that does exist. Now, when it comes to a production price, when you're saying, okay, now I want to take this to, 1,000 pieces a month or whatever it may be, Well, that's when you have someone take a look at it and say, okay, we're going to squeeze what we can out of this. Because the first one, you're not really paying for material or labor, you're just paying for time. Here it is, boom, you know, if it works. And a lot of times, you know, if it works, there's really no guarantee. It works with your design. Hey, we're seeing no shorts, but what it does, you know, it doesn't. But yeah, you can do that very easily.
Yeah. And is that the case? I noticed on your site, Roger, you do you have some custom made parts as well. You have a second kind of string to your bow in terms of business.
Right.
And that fits in that kind of new trend we're seeing as these manufacturing ecosystems that have appeared in the CNC world, they've appeared in the 3D printing world. Are we seeing that in the bare board world where you do have that really dynamic process? You upload the Gerbers, you do DFM on the fly, you get a whole bunch of prices, you can shift a slider across that says, you know, this is how the price is going to change with volume. This is how the price might change with different locations. Is that available to to your average board buyer, and do they know how to use it?
Well, and so it's interesting. I hark back to saying how important it is to educate the buyer. In these types of applications, uploading the Gerber still requires a little bit of manual process from our perspective. So unless there's an engineer that understands the real fabrication type language, it's not quite as automated as I would like to see it. But once again, we're still dealing with Chinese manufacturing. I think that this embracing of AI is going to become necessary, and certainly the desire for instant data is right around the corner. We are, I think the board industry is still embracing that. The more customization that's required, and as Greg mentioned, if it's pretty simple design, it's not that difficult. But as the technology increases, it just the need for cyber versus physical interaction is still in demand, and in the bare board business for sure.
I'm curious, Greg, if somehow we can get a probe that we can put into Greg's head, and we can suck out that 28 years of knowledge, and we can use that to start the machine learning process.
But to add to what you're saying, there is a company out in California that's pretty much a software company that developed a process where you can send them the bill of material, Gerber, and you say, I want 5 or 10 pieces or whatever it may be, the next amount of time, and they will give you a quote automatically, spit it out.
Right.
Again, it's all generalization, and if it's for proof of concept, great. But when it comes to, I got to hand it to Roger because, he's, they do both. And speaking of videos, I like the presentation you guys do as well. So return the favor on that one. No, you guys do. I like the marketing when you talk about, the one and the other and what it means, and even explain the meaning of your name, which is nice.
Right.
But I find it's kind of hard that, you go in there, and I think there's some challenges where you have to explain to a customer where, when you're selling boards and going to a contract manufacturer saying, we're not the competitor, because even in my stint with a very large domestic board manufacturer who also do assembly, it was hard to go into contract manufacturers. So, well, you build assembly. No, and I said, you would laugh. I tell them, because first of all, we can't build your production, okay? And second, you couldn't charge the price that we charge because you couldn't deliver in 2 days, And
Right.
so I said, we're really not competitors, okay? So, in fact, in some cases, I actually sold them on saying, hey, let us do your MPI for you, so you don't have to turn your shop upside down to try to build 2 pieces in 2 days, offload it to us. And some companies did that because it's something they can or cannot do. And, unfortunately, some people feel as a threat, but it's really not.
No, it actually shouldn't be viewed that way, and you're correct. It's more of a partnership type of thing, and it allows you to weed out the problems that you're going to encounter in very small volumes, and then you can map the processes and take it to a high volume shop, and everybody's happy. It streamlines it, if you ask me.
Yes, actually, exactly. I'm not upset if I don't get the small runs. Come see me afterwards.
Exactly. We're all looking for that.
Speak to the issue of having to change from one PCB board house to another. When I worked for a proto shop, we're always reluctant to shift vendors because it was the devil you know versus the devil you don't know, right? And the processes, because with that came some risk, but maybe that's different these days. I mean, how is that? What is that risk?
Well, I mean, that's one of the things I train customers on, is give them the confidence to move. I mean, I always joke about things. I like to use analogies. I say, a love may be blind, but buying a circuit board doesn't have to be. Okay. You could have more than one vendor. You can be a polygamist and let your vendors know you'll be dating other vendors. Okay. With all things being equal, quality and delivery, you're looking at price. Okay. So when you're assuming that, then before you go through before I tell anyone to go through the qualification process, let's see your ISO, let's see this, let's see, hey, look, get an NDA in place and say, let's see how you quote on this. Let's quote for fun for a while. I always say that, quote for fun. Doesn't cost anything. And we're not asking you to quote assembly. I can quote a board in 5 minutes. That's not, I can throw it against the wall and say, hey, do you like this price? So if the price is good and you try them out a few times, price is good, okay, fine, great, good. Now you do the qualification process. And one of the things about the qualification process that a lot of people overlook, which is the best one, is ask for references. People don't ask for references and follow that up, those references. They don't call, because the fact of the matter is, when I talk about my company, Direct PCB or Better Board Buying, depending on what I'm doing, or Roger talks about iCage, when we talk about our companies, we're bragging. But when the customer talks about our companies, that's the truth. Yeah. And when you ask the reference, call the reference, you have to ask a couple of questions. Now, these are the things that you were talking about, Eric. Get to that. You got to ask a couple of questions. You got to ask, hey, okay, how long have you been doing business with them? 6 months or 6 years? Okay, 6 months, not a great reference. The second is, you want to ask, hey, how much of your business is with this vendor, and vice versa? How much of the vendor is that guy's business? Okay, so you could see the mutual investment there is. And then the other thing you would ask is technology, because as Roger said, okay, I'm going to you with the HDI board, and the reference says, yeah, Greg does a great job on my 2-layer stuff. Well, that doesn't help at all. That's, so it's not a good vendor. And, and another good question is to ask is, how did the vendor solve a problem or handle a problem? The biggest one, because it's not if, it's when a problem is going to happen. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times where, a customer called me 5 o'clock on a Friday, and I'll have a result and resolution by Monday morning. But it was a funny story real quick. I gave 5 references out, and the customer called me back. He says, Greg, you got raving reviews, and we're going to go ahead with you. Hey, I just want to let you know about this one customer. They told me about this big problem you had last year. Like, ugh. And I was like, oh. He goes, yeah, but no. The customer told me what happened, how it happened, and how you resolved it. And that's what got me, is how you resolved it. Yeah. Now, that was a great testimonial. But honestly, I took his name off the list of my future references.
But it's true. And this crisis has probably highlighted exactly that, Greg. People are having challenges through the crisis. And it's how you guys are handling those challenges for your customers that really shows your mettle, rather than, everybody can look after a customer when everything's going swimmingly at all ends of the supply chain. When it starts to get a bit iffy,
excuse me, I'm online.
Really shows your mettle.
Yeah, I do agree.
Time's up, Greg. People are coming in to get you.
Yeah, I know. People.
It's the guy with the probe to get all that information.
You're in high demand. I have none of that, but I would add to Greg's. It is difficult to change suppliers. I really thought that as we embrace this new normal, we might look to, maybe add virtual audits and virtual documentation, and it's just not as easy as I anticipated it being, quite frankly. Customers still want to tour the factory, do their own audits. And not only that, but China's very proprietary, and they don't like sharing documents virtually or disclosing audits virtually. But I'm hoping that if this turns out to be the new normal and we don't get to travel and visit China twice a year anymore, that we can embrace these different ways of approving new vendors and suppliers, and maybe that'll make mine and Greg's job a little easier going forward. It's yet to be seen, though, frankly.
Sure.
Yeah, and it's having that digital thread and that digital twin of every board, and that's gonna give you more consistency, make it easier to move stuff, make it easier to audit and get new factories on board. So I think there's some transformation, more transformation needed.
Sending a complete package. Another thing is, I think is really a bad thing is, we talk about proprietary information. You were talking about Roger, and then Philip, you're talking about, send a digital package. I can't tell you how many times where I get a quote from a contract manufacturer, and they'll send me everything. The board, the bill of material, the assembly drawing, the schematic. And I'm just saying, okay, I got a US
We're just going to make the board, right?
Yeah, and I got a US server here. And I know you deal directly with companies in China. You just sent everything overseas. Where's the company protection?
I really don't know, but that truly amazes me. And I made a comment on my first visit to China. There's 4 Apple stores on every block in Shenzhen, and I think we all know they're not really Apple stores.
They're not?
No?
They look just like them, but
you mean
listen, I'm as the keeper of the time here, I look to wrap this in respect of everybody's time, but let me just wrap with kind of a look to the future here. What do you see as the big trends moving out of 2020, thank God, and into 2021? What do you see as kind of the big trends, major trends for this particular industry? Roger or Greg, jump on.
Well, I mean, I think that certainly 5G, IoT is going to be something that has the potential to provide a lot of growth in our industry going forward. The fact that more and more items are going to communicate with each other just requires, higher technology and bigger demand for our products. I think it kind of future-proofs our industry going forward. There's all kinds of other things down the road that I know very little about, but I mean, I've heard rumors of biodegradable circuit boards and, other items that certainly wearable technology that we mentioned is probably a short-term thing that I think we're going to see a very high impact from the consumer's perspective going forward for sure.
Greg?
No, from a technology standpoint, I agree with Roger on that. I'm looking more of a logistics standpoint with COVID, what's happened, the push for made in America, the challenges of finding that. I think it's in, domestic manufacturers, North American manufacturers' hands. The ball's in their court, for lack of a better word, to make it successful. And if it doesn't change in the next 6 months, there's going to be a normalization, so to speak. And, we have this big rush this way, and then it's going to come back this way. And, it's still going to be, it's going to be hard to find, at least for the board part of it, bare board part of it. I think it's going to be challenging to keep the bare board industry here if we don't provide that service. And I'm not talking price, I'm just talking service. The biggest complaint I've got is not, Greg, the prices are too high. I can't get what I want, down the street, but I can get it halfway around the world quite easily. So that's I say is going to be the biggest challenge going forward, and it's in the domestic industry's hands. And here I'm trying to force it. You're going to bring a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. I mean, that's what it is, and unfortunately, that's where it's going. I see.
Yeah. If they don't want to bid, they can't have the business.
Yeah,
Right.
and I mean, I would agree with Greg. I see that as a huge challenge, and I'm not opposed to promoting domestic sources for those boards. Then our business model would allow us to, create relationships with domestic providers. And I would love not to have to stay up till midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning just to communicate with my engineering team in China or my logistics support. That would be fine with me. I would love to see us. I'm concerned. I'm not positive that it's coming back, certainly from the bare board manufacturing perspective, but I would be in support of that and look to support that industry here domestically.
I agree. But when it comes to assembly, 8 out of 10 times when a customer asks me, Greg, can you get these assembled? 8 out of 10 times I recommend here.
Oh, I would too.
For assembly, the board, getting the board from over there, okay, that's fine. But I mean, the board is a component, okay. But the assembly, in some cases here, yes, there's price, but there's total cost, and I've proven several times total cost does make sense here when it comes to the assembly.
Yeah,
Very good.
Agree 100%. Absolutely.
Okay. Good. Well, that's a good note to end on then, right? You're in 100% agreement. So
Absolutely.
let's embrace
Listen,
that.
We have to end, but I just want to say thank you to both of you, Greg and Ron.
Sure.
This has been terrific. And to the audience, I'd say, you've talked about wanting to put a probe in Greg's. I keep thinking what we need is a Vulcan mind meld. And, if we can't do that to Greg, but what I would encourage people to do who are watching or interested is reach out to either of these gentlemen, Greg or Roger. I think they're great resources for the industry. And obviously, I think you can tell, have a lot of knowledge on this particular area that they can share. So gentlemen, thank you again for your time, for participation today. For the audience, I say thank you for tuning in. We do these every 2 weeks, so look forward to the next couple through the rest of the year. I think we have some interesting ones coming. And as I always say at the end, be smart, be safe, and as always, be sexy. And thank you, gentlemen, again. See, Roger's smiling.
Live long and prosper.
Thanks, guys.
See you.
Thank you.
All right.
Stay safe.
Thank you.